as we listen to Jesus teaching his disciples the lessons of the Beatitudes, we're invited to reflect on them again. On the one hand, these are truths, teachings that we acknowledge, that we recognize, that we almost make cliche. But on the other hand, they're very hard to really internalize. That this blessedness of which Jesus speaks isn't a word that speaks to holiness. It's a word that speaks to happiness. Fortunate, blessed, happy are those. And I don't know that we always believe that poverty, sorrow, disregard, meekness, purity, that these things lead to happiness. I mean, we know it, we believe it, but do we, how many people buy a lottery ticket and beg God to make sure that their lives aren't destroyed by winning the jackpot? We know we should, but still we buy a lottery ticket and secretly hope not only that we could win, but then that we would beat the odds and not be harmed by what we want. It's unusual, right, that we would recognize the value of driving an old beater that everybody kind of looks funny at when I could have a brand new big truck that would impress my friends and maybe even more importantly, the strangers I pass on the road. It's hard to internalize and truly believe that sorrow is a path to value and meaning and freedom. And before we recognize the spiritual lesson that I think underlies Jesus's teaching, maybe just to consider if it's true. I don't know if children still read Henry David Thoreau in high school. They probably should. But he struggled also with the cost of things. I think he went and built a cabin in the woods and documented his life as he built his life there in a cabin in the woods. And not the cost of dollars and cents, the cost of life. What living beyond our needs costs us. And maybe sometimes it's perfectly worth it to have some of our desires and wants. But when those desires and wants become needs, and inevitably, or apparently so, they do, we start to need the things that we've gotten because we wanted them. It costs us, well, for sure money, but also our life. I know I act silly sometimes as relates to my housing, and I complained entirely too much when the Archbishop required that I upgrade my trailer for the sake of dignity, I would guess, was his goal. And I don't blame him for that or throw shade. But actually my life was easier. I had more life before I switched, right? Because now I have more to clean. Now I have an extra black tank to worry about. Now I had to go back and fix everything anew when, to be honest, I had a perfectly functioning bathroom and a perfectly functioning bedroom and the same mattress that I moved to the new trailer, which is why I sleep well at night, and a perfectly functioning kitchen, and everything I needed worked wonderfully. I've got everything I need working again. But it cost me money, but it also cost me life to make that upgrade. And I would be scared that at some point, like, I couldn't live without the extra space, because extra space comes at a price. I knew a family actually did their wedding when I was pastoring Gonzales, who lost everything over a double wide trailer. Right? They had a perfectly decent old trailer, and at some point in the year after they married, they decided, or somebody convinced them, that they needed to upgrade. And so they got themselves a brand new double wide trailer, whose payments they could not afford. The tax on which they could not afford. And so she ended up working 3 jobs, and he ended up working 2 jobs, and I think then went back to 1 job, which was an imbalance that was very unhealthy in the relationship, because he was home alone too much, and the 17-year-old neighbor was alone too much, and the troubles that ensued ended their marriage and caused incredible disruption in their life over a double wide trailer. Sometimes I worry that we make needs out of our wants. Like, if I'm happy going to gyms, it's not the fanciest food in the world, it's not the fanciest environment in the world, but I can eat healthy there, right? Life is easy. You don't need reservations. You don't need a lot of money. There are other restaurants that have fancier food, that are harder to get into, that would impress our friends when we go, that we might enjoy entirely more. But it helps us also learn the lesson that blessed, happy are those who suffer a little, who are poor a little. Because if I start to need those fancy restaurants, my life is a lot harder. I lose a lot of life. I say all of this sounding like a minimalist, and that's really not Jesus's point or mine. But it is helpful to recognize the truths that those who win the lottery almost always lose their lives. Like, just empirically, if you go and study the people, case studies, that we have a tendency to grow our needs, and that takes away our lives. I could get a nicer, newer truck. I love my truck. I wouldn't dream of it. But if I wasn't driving the really decent old truck I got right now, I could get a better one, right? And people would be more impressed. Like, I remember the old beater I had before this one, and I would show up sometimes in a gated community to go and anoint someone, to go and visit someone, and they were very suspicious of what I was coming to do. And if that mattered to me, if that little bit of persecution, if that little bit of social dysfunction mattered to me, it would have cost me not just money, but life. And in the freedom of not needing to worry about that, I actually have more life, more room to be generous, more room to have security. Like, I sit with a secure retirement, and these days I've long since stopped giving 10% of my salary every year. I've found meaningful ways to share half of my income. And I can without costing me anything, because of the life choices that I make that keep me from giving away my life to things, from losing my life to things that ultimately don't bless me, don't make me happy, don't fulfill me. Okay, that's enough of the human, psychological, almost stoic babble. What Jesus, I think, is talking about is love. There are things that get in the way of love, and that there are things that help us grow in love. And so often the things we think will make us happy isolate us and focus us back in on ourselves and make it harder to be vulnerable enough to share our lives with others. And so often the things that we would avoid if we could, the suffering, the poverty, so often those are the things that connect us and help us grow in love with the people we most care about. That a young couple struggling, barely able to pay the bills, but scrimping and saving to throw a little birthday party for their daughter's first birthday. And the kind of life and love and joy that emanates in that reality, as opposed to if we have a little bit too many resources and start to need too many things and start to spend too much time doing our own things. And we allow stuff or position or pleasure to start to get in the way of relationship and love. The Beatitudes are a continuation of Jesus's core teaching, that we need relationship. We need to love God and love our neighbor. And anything that builds those relationships will make us truly happy. It's not that that's our duty and our responsibility and we really should do that. It's what would bring us fulfillment and joy and peace and happiness. And many of the things that we keep getting distracted and wanting and then needing. I'm always amazed how advertising works. They'll give you anything free for 3 months. Something you didn't need, that you never missed. But after 3 months, you'll buy it for the rest of your life because you can't live without it anymore. Jesus might say, blessed are those who don't take 3-month free trials. Because sometimes the stuff that we start to need, the esteem that we start to need, the pleasure that we start to need, sometimes that gets in the way of what would make me happiest, where my blessings come from, what could let me look back on my life and say, I've been incredibly fortunate, incredibly blessed. And Jesus points the way to that blessing and that happiness if we're brave enough to listen more deeply, not just with our ears, but to allow his message to transform even our lives.